Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining Education USA Thursday lectures. I hope you're all staying safe and healthy. My name is Katerina Alexandruk. I'm the coordinator for the Education USA network in Ukraine. And today we will speak about the admission, but not in a usual way. We will speak about a unique model of admission that exists in the United States, because every time when we think about pursuing higher education in the United States, we think, or in any other country, we think that there is only one way to be admitted to four-year institutions. But in the United States, there is a unique model that includes community colleges, and you will learn more about community colleges today. That called 2+2 model, which allows to pursue your degree, your bachelor degree in the United States in a little different way. Community colleges offer a simplest admission process and the lower tuition fee, and the most important, they usually offer very easy guaranteed transmission from community college to a four-year institution of your dream. And I'm very pleased to introduce our guest today. Stacy Bustios is a representative from Northern Virginia Community College, and Kelly O'Keefe is from Monroe Community College, and the ladies will speak more about the advantages and benefits of studying in community colleges and on what they can offer you and what is the procedure of the transfer from the community college to the university, to four-year university, and you will have a great opportunity to ask them your questions. Please feel free to leave them in the chat box, and at the end of the presentation we will have time to address all your questions. So ladies, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Great. Well, good evening, everyone, and it's morning time here in Virginia. But my name is Stacy Bustios, and thank you, Katya, and the America House for hosting us today and to let us share with you a little bit about the U.S. community college system. But not only that, as Katya mentioned, we want to share with you why, as an international student, as a Ukrainian student who wants to come to the U.S. to ultimately get your bachelor's degree and maybe even beyond bachelor's, why a community college might be a good option for you as an alternative pathway. And there's some benefits to doing that, and we'll share with you why you might want to consider that an option with a community college in that ultimate goal of getting your bachelor's degree in the United States. So before we begin with talking about the pathway to the bachelor's, I think it might be helpful to share a little bit about who we are as a community college, to give you that background, because it's not common. You don't really find this system anywhere else in the Ukraine or in other countries of the world, and it is quite unique. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background about that, and then we'll share with you, as an international student, some of the benefits that you could take from this and how we work with university partners where you can transfer from the community college to a university of your dreams to get that bachelor's degree. So we'll start with, just so you understand what our primary mission as a community college and why we kind of have an open admissions process, as Katya mentioned, is we exist to increase access to higher education for everyone. And so that's why our admission standards are different than university, because we have community in our name. And just to point out, not all community colleges have the word community. Sometimes they just say college. But we were originally, of course, developed to be responding to our local community needs. And of course, over years and decades, those needs have expanded. And of course, we are enrolling many international students now as part of our larger communities. And we serve a diverse student population. So we have students that are the traditional college age of 18 to 21, but you'll also find in the classroom at a community college students, you know, that are working and are maybe a little bit what we would call a non-traditional student. So they may be older, maybe in their 30s or 40s, that are also coming back to higher education to seek a degree. So those are some of the main differences of the mission of a community college, unlike maybe a university you would find. And this is just a map to show you that community colleges are everywhere in the United States. So if you have a university, a dream university in mind, somewhere in the United States, there's probably several community colleges that are around those universities that have transfer agreements with that university. So this is just to show you that we are located everywhere in the United States where there are large populations of people residing. And of those community colleges, there are just over 1,000 community colleges. So on the map there that you saw, that's a lot. And as I mentioned, with age, we have students, the majority of our students are in the under 22 and younger age. But of course, as I mentioned, we have students that are a bit older that are in their later 20s or 30s, and even a smaller population that are over 40 that are coming to community colleges, which would be different than university. We have students studying full-time, but we have a lot of students that are studying part-time, those students that are working. And of course, the ratio between male and female is what you would see in many universities these days. There's more women, I think, studying higher education than men in a lot of universities and colleges. And just so you understand, you probably kind of already know this from the U.S. higher education system, right? After high school, many students will go on directly to university to get their bachelor's degree. But the community college fits in right before the bachelor's degree, and what we are offering is called an associate's degree. And usually that is a 2-year degree. And in some cases, we'll talk a little bit later about this, but after 2 years, you could go directly and go get a job, depending on what you study. But more and more students are coming for our associate's degrees that are tied to going on to the bachelor's degree program. And this is what we call the 2+2 model. And so essentially, some of our associate degrees are designed to be the equivalent of the first 2 years of the bachelor's degree program. So you'll find a lot of the general education courses that are built into these associate degree programs. And this is the amazing thing, is that if a student, essentially you finish high school, whether you're an American student or a student from the Ukraine, and you could apply, and many do apply to go directly to university and do their full 4 years at the university and complete their bachelor's degree. And so their diploma has that university's name and the bachelor's degree. But as I mentioned, this is the model and the path that we want to highlight for you today, is this 2+2 model of starting at the community college after high school, right? Essentially 2 years to do that associate's degree. And of course, if you're coming to the US and you need some English courses as well, many of our community colleges offer that also. If your TOEFL or IELTS score is not high enough, maybe to get in directly to university, many of our programs have intensive English programs that can prepare you as well for academic English. So you can do 2 years at the community college and then 2 years at university, and you essentially are getting the same bachelor's degree in the end as you did if you were at university for the full 4 years. But we'll show you some of the differences in the benefits of going through this alternative path as we go on to the next slides. And this is just a few of the schools between Northern Virginia Community College and Monroe Community College where our students are transferring to on a regular basis. This is just a small listing of schools that our students transfer to, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But it's important for you to know that the community college works hand in hand with university partners because it's our goal to see our students succeed, because our students, many of them are coming to us with the goal in mind to go on to university. So community colleges work very hard to create pathways, academic pathways for transfer to some of the top universities in the country. And so these are schools that are primarily focused in the Virginia and New York regions where our community colleges are located, but many of our students are transferring on to universities across the country, which include large public research universities and even some Ivy League universities as well. Now, why, you would ask, why should I go to a community college as an international student? What is the benefit to me? And probably I'd be speaking more to your parents right now because, and we'll show you in a little bit, but the cost, there's a huge difference in cost in terms of going, starting at a community college. Our tuition is known to be more affordable in many ways than university. And this is especially true for those students that are international students, where you are usually paying the out-of-state rate for tuition. So we are usually 1/2 to 1/3 of the cost for tuition compared to our university partners. And so we see even American students that are coming more and more to community colleges to save money on the increasing rise in tuition in the United States. So that is one of the primary benefits for you, but also we are also accessible, right? So as I mentioned, we are open admissions because one of the community college goals is for us to be open to provide more access to people to higher education. So as a result, international students can take advantage of our open admissions process. And this means, and we'll see in a bit what that means, but compared to university, which we would call competitive admissions, this may be a backup option for you if you don't get into your dream university in the US. There's some other ways to consider getting into that university through a community college. And of course, third is we are accredited. So that means that we have the same academic standards as our 4-year university partners. And that's why our credits, right, the classes you take at a community college will be transferable onto a university because they accept our classes and our credits as the same level and standard as what they are offering at their universities. And so those are some of the 3 main benefits that you will want to keep in mind as we go further into the presentation. I'm going to hand it off to Carly to talk a little bit more in detail about each of those.
Thanks, Stacy. So as Stacy mentioned, we are open admissions. So I just wanted to go into a little bit more detail about what that means. So an open admission policy basically means that you don't really need to impress us with your application like you focus so much with a 4-year institution, a 4-year university. Basically, you just need to meet our requirements and you are typically automatically admitted. So what this means is, you would fill out an application for admission. You would need to provide proof that you have completed high school or secondary school, or you're almost there, you're on your way, you will finish before you enroll. And provide proof of your English proficiency. So many of you have probably heard of the TOEFL exam, the IELTS exam. Now a lot of schools are accepting Duolingo. So you can take a test and submit a score that way. Depending on the school, they'll have a different range of minimum scores that they require for admission. Other schools might not require an English proficiency score at all because they may have an intensive English program or ESL courses that you can take when you arrive. So some of them may have their own school's English placement test that you could take either remotely before you come or when you arrive to campus. So that will depend on each individual school and what they have to offer and what their requirements are for English. But unlike most 4-year universities and colleges, we don't require the SAT or ACT, which I know is a huge benefit to a lot of international students because that test is really designed for native speakers, and that can be a barrier to admission for a lot of international students. If you have taken that test and you want to submit scores, we'll absolutely accept them. Sometimes those scores can be used for scholarships, better access to certain scholarships, or they may be used to place you in a certain level of math or English course. But like I said, most students do not submit those because it's not required. And similarly, we also don't require personal statements or essays or letters of recommendation like most four-year institutions do. So it's a lot less that you need to do in order to be admitted. You just have to meet our minimum requirements. So most community colleges offer two types of degrees that you can choose from. The first one are Associate of Applied Arts or Applied Sciences, so an AAA or AAS degree. And these are more technical or vocational degrees typically. They're intended for entry directly into the workplace most of the time. Although that doesn't mean that if you change your mind and you decide to go on to a four-year institution, that some of those credits may still transfer to universities anyway. They're just not set up that way in the way that the Associate of Arts or Associate of Science, the AA or AS degree, is set up. Those majors are really built and designed and intended for transfer to universities. So if you know that transfer to a four-year institution to get your bachelor's degree is the ultimate goal for you, it's best to start out in one of those Associate of Arts or Associate of Science degrees. If you know that you would rather do a more technical or vocational program, just do 2 years and then go back to Ukraine or pursue work, then that's also an option for you. So here are some examples of those technical degree programs that I mentioned. This is just a mix of ones that NOVA and MCC both offer. So things like heating, air conditioning, and refrigeration, HVAC, audiovisual communications technology, automotive technology, so becoming like an auto mechanic, construction management, cybersecurity, GIS, computer and networking technology, different engineering technologies like electrical or mechanical. Excuse me. And then there are certain health programs as well, like radiography, certain nursing programs, physical therapy assistants, those types of things as well. So a lot of programs where you're making things with your hands, or very technical focused or healthcare focused programs that only require 2 years of schooling. And those transfer degrees, we have many of them, but these are some of the ones that we see international students focusing on more specifically. We see a lot of students in business administration, computer science, engineering, IT, science, communications, and there's a lot of students, especially our athletes at MCC, who pursue just a general liberal arts degree. If you don't really know what you want to go into, that's a great way to complete all your general education requirements and complete a 2-year degree. And then once you get to the 4-year school, you can really focus in on an area of study that interests you the most. Excuse me. So here are some other benefits besides the admission and the types of programs that are really beneficial to you as an international student. So community colleges, they really focus on teaching and learning. 4-year institutions, faculty members have professors. They have, aside from their teaching responsibilities, they also have requirements for doing research, and that takes up a lot of their time. So what's great about the community college is that I'm sorry, I have to get some water.
Yeah, and I'll just get a second to remind everybody you can leave your questions in the chat.
Sorry about that. So what's great about the community college is there's really a focus on teaching and learning. Classes are all taught by professors, by faculty, with oftentimes the same advanced degrees as faculty members at 4-year schools. They're not taught by teaching assistants, graduate students, things like that. So that also allows for small class sizes. I would say at MCC, an average class size is less than 30 students. At a large four-year school, you might have an introduction to psychology class or a calculus class in a giant lecture hall with, up to 200 students or more. You really won't see that very often at a community college. You'll really see small class sizes for the most part. So there's a lot more opportunity for discussion, interaction with your faculty and your classmates. So you're forging those relationships with other students and with your professors. And because we're a community college and we serve a lot of needs within the community, we have a lot of programs that are designed to support our students in being successful, not only academically, but also their social needs. So we often have very robust tutoring programs. You could usually, there's either a central tutoring center on campus, or different departments offer a lot of tutoring services. We offer things like a lot of campus programming and different performances. There's a lot of clubs. There's a lot of free food. And a lot of schools these days are even building on-campus housing at community colleges. I would say in the past, a lot of community colleges were viewed more as commuter schools, meaning students would commute from off-campus, living with their families, to school. And I think that is still the case the majority of the time, but we've also seen a growing desire and need to offer on-campus housing at many community colleges. So MCC built dorms or on-campus residence halls probably about 15 years ago, and those have been very popular. They've been great for our international students because that's just a much easier and safer way for them to live and be part of the campus community. But they can live off campus if they would like to. And I also wanted to highlight a lot of students become interested in what their work opportunities can be when they come to the United States. So most students do have to pursue work opportunities on campus, but once they've been a student for at least a year, there's also opportunities for pursuing off-campus internships through what's called CPT, Curricular Practical Training, or OPT, Optional Practical Training. So if your particular program has an internship component built into it in the summer and a regular semester, we can assist you in finding an off-campus internship opportunity and authorizing you to do that work. And also, after completing your associate's degree, you'll be eligible to apply for 1 year of work authorization in the United States. If you wanted to take a break between finishing your associate's degree and going on to your bachelor's degree and get a little bit of work experience, you could do that through OPT and find a job for 1 year or internship for 1 year in your area of study. So we just wanted to also kind of culminate all of these things that we've talked about into a few different student examples. Excuse me. So one example is Karina. She's what we call the undecided student. So Karina really wants to attend university in the United States, but she doesn't know what major or what program she wants to pursue. Her English skills also need some improvement before she's truly ready for American university study. So Karina has an aunt in Los Angeles, California, who she can stay with and live with while she begins her studies. And she learns that attending community college will save money and allow for flexibility. She can improve her English skills and she can explore different subjects to determine which major to choose while she's at the community college. So Karina does some research. She locates a community college near her aunt's home in Los Angeles, and her high school diploma is all she needs to submit for acceptance in this case. For placement into English courses, she can submit the TOEFL test, or she can just take an English placement test at the college, which is what she ultimately chooses to do. She enrolls as a liberal arts major, and she takes an ESL or English class alongside classes in math, drawing, and physics. So she's doing a little exploration while working on her English skills as well. So she ultimately, after some time and getting to know the different options available to her, she chooses a major in engineering science. She'll work with her advisor over the next few semesters to explore her transfer options and work on a longer-term academic plan. After completing her associate's degree in engineering science, she decides that she'll transfer to a 4-year public partner university in California to pursue her bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. So that just kind of shows a path for a student who needs to work on their English and or needs some time to really explore and see what's the best fit for them. And community college is great because, you don't want to, because time is money at university, and you don't want to, waste time, not, at a 4-year university kind of doing that exploration. A community college really gives that to that type of student. So this is the dream school student. His name is Igor. So since he was a young boy, Igor has dreamed of attending New York University in New York City to study cinema. NYU is a very highly selective school, which means they get many thousands of applications every year and can only accept a small number of those students. Igor has very strong English skills, but his high school GPA, while still great, is not quite high enough, and his SAT scores either are not quite high enough for acceptance into NYU. They have very, very high expectations for acceptance. Igor's parents are also worried about the high cost of living and studying in New York City at a private university. So a place like NYU could have tuition upwards of $60,000 a year, and then living in a place like New York City can also be very, very costly. So they're not wrong to have those concerns. So Igor does some research, and he ends up locating a few community colleges near New York City that have specific degree programs in cinema or film studies. Now, New York City, being one of the largest city in the United States, there's dozens of community colleges in New York and in the metropolitan area that he could potentially look at, but what you have to do is make sure that those schools have the particular degree program that you're interested in pursuing. So not all of them will have something like cinema or film studies. So he chooses to attend a community college in the borough of Queens, which is just a short train ride from Manhattan or downtown New York City, where NYU is located. Housing and tuition is much more affordable there as well than it would have been right by NYU. So Igor decides, after studying for 1 to 2 years at this community college, he'll apply for transfer to NYU to pursue his bachelor's degree there. And NYU has a policy that the SAT can be waived if you've completed at least 1 year of U.S. college study. So the fact that his SAT scores were not strong enough for him to get in as a freshman, as a first-year student, is no longer a concern, because he can send his community college transcript with a great GPA, and that will be looked at more strongly than his high school grades and than his SAT, because he can prove by going to community college that he can handle U.S. college level study. So his chances of acceptance of NYU are now much better. And I also wanted to highlight this to show that if a student does not want to complete an associate's degree at the community college, say they only want to go there for a year, year and a half, they don't have to go for 2+ years and complete the associate's degree unless they want to. It's more of a personal choice. So if Igor is very eager to get to NYU as soon as possible, and he only wants to do a year or so at the community college and then try to apply to NYU and see if his chances are better, that's a perfectly acceptable path. I have many students who do that, choosing to complete that full associate's degree is also a great choice. It's just a matter of personal preference. Obviously, the longer time that you spend at a community college, up to 2 years or 60 credits or so, is going to probably be cheaper in the long run for your 4 years of education because you can transfer more credits. But it's a matter of personal preference. Some students really want to get to that 4-year university and have that 4-year university experience sooner. And for others, that's not as much of a priority, so it just depends. And then we're going to profile Alina last, and she's what we're going to call the dream program student. So Alina really wants to go to the United States to study political science. She hears that Washington, D.C. is one of the best places in the world to study this. So she does some research about the best universities to study political science in Washington, D.C. She has the grades and scores to be accepted to some of these schools, but not all of her favorite choices. She's also discouraged at the high cost of many of the universities. She worries her scores are not high enough for her to receive a big enough scholarship. So she does a little bit more research, and she finds that several of her top university choices in Washington, D.C. have transfer agreements with a community college nearby in the state of Maryland. Alina decides to enroll at this community college for the first 2 years and earn her associate's degree. She'll save money on tuition, improve her English. She'll also learn the D.C. area and American culture. She'll have more time to explore 4-year university options and choose her favorites to apply to. She'll also have more options for enrollment if she performs well at her community college, more acceptances, and hopefully she'll get some scholarship offers. So this is an example as well of a person who can explore those opportunities for those direct transfer agreements for 2+2. I know at Monroe Community College, we have students who they choose to come to us for specific 2+2 transfer agreements that we have, and other students just come because they know that they're not ready to be accepted into their top choice 4-year school, and they know that spending time at community college and improving their kind of academic profile will give them a better chance at acceptance. So there's really 2 ways to look at 2+2. You can look at it as a specific transfer agreement, perhaps a guaranteed admission program of 2 years, then 2 years, having an exact outline of how your courses at the community college will transfer and exactly the classes that you'll need to complete at the next school. Or it can be kind of looked at as a more just open opportunity to get where you're trying to go. Either way, the benefits are pretty much the same. You're going to either way, save time, money, and you just need to kind of do a little work to make sure that your transfer is going to go as smooth as possible. And we have a number of offices or individuals at our campuses who will help with that. Typically, we have not only academic advisors, but also transfer advisors often at community colleges. So I'm going to pass back to Stacy, and she's going to give a little bit of a profile of her particular college, and then I'll talk about mine as well.
Great, thanks, Carly. And these are all great case studies. All 3 of these types of students definitely exist amongst especially our international students of where they are in their kind of higher ed journey. And these are great examples. And I just wanted to also emphasize that community colleges do have transfer resources, right? So we have advisors and support set up to make you successful, right? To help you go on to the university, which I think is encouraging for you as an international student to know. So as you're kind of starting, and maybe hopefully we've convinced you that there's some benefit to looking at community colleges a little bit more seriously than you were before, maybe half an hour ago. So we want to share with you 2 different community colleges. Of course, they're ours, but what you might want to look at when you start doing your own research, because there's differences in size and location and the transfer agreements that we have. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about Northern Virginia Community College. We have 6 campuses, and we are just outside of Washington, D.C. So Alina, in your case study, she could also, if she was interested in Washington, D.C., she could look at Maryland and Virginia community colleges, because we have many that are surrounding the city and are good options for students. But just to give you a little bit more information, Carly, you can go to the next slide. Great. So NOVA, as we're known in the area, we are the largest higher education institution in Virginia, and we are considered the third largest community college in the United States, as I mentioned, we have 6 campuses, and on those 6 campuses, we serve about 70,000 students. Each campus seems like a much smaller than it sounds, but because we have full-time and part-time students. And we are working with over 40 universities, we have formal transfer agreements with those universities, primarily in the Virginia, Maryland, and DC area, but we also see our students transferring all over the United States. And to talk a little bit about our international statistics, we have just over 600 international students that are studying with us on F and J visas. And we have over 100 countries represented, including the Ukraine. I think I was looking this morning, I think we have 4 Ukrainian students studying with us as of right now in the spring semester. And as you can see, these are our top international student populations. Because we're located so close to Washington, D.C., we have a quite diverse population of students and professors just based on our location. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the benefits of coming to a community college first is really saving on the tuition expenses, at least for the first year or 2. And so we always like to give you a cost comparison as you're looking as an international student. Of course, usually you are being asked to pay the out-of-state tuition rate. And as you can see here, the cost at NOVA versus one of our large state institutions, the University of Virginia, for 1 year at NOVA, when you're talking about the tuition and estimated living expenses, we are about $24,400 versus the University of Virginia. If you would enroll as an international student, you're closer to $64,000. So even if you chose to come to a community college for 1 year, you're saving your family quite a bit of money. And I know students also ask usually about scholarships and all of that, which are usually more possible at the university level. Community colleges don't have as many resources to provide scholarships, although that's dependent on the college. But we usually say that our cost savings come in at the tuition rate that we are, which is usually about a half to a third lower than our university partners.
So Monroe Community College is located in Rochester, New York. So I know a lot of people around the world, when they think of New York, they think of New York City. But we're actually located much closer to Canada than we are to New York City. We're about a 5.5-hour drive or 1 hour flight to New York City, whereas we're only about a 3-hour drive to Toronto, Canada, or if you've ever heard of Niagara Falls, we're about a 1.5-hour drive to Niagara Falls. We're located in upstate New York, or what's called the Finger Lakes region, or Western New York often. So it's much different than you might have in your head when you think of New York. We have 9 other respected colleges and universities in the area, some of which you might have heard of, but many of which are popular transfer options for students once they finish at MCC. And Rochester also has a large Ukrainian community. We have a suburb outside the city of Rochester called Webster, which ranks number 8 in the United States for the % of residents born in Ukraine. So even if we don't have a lot of international students at MCC studying on a visa, we have a lot of Ukrainian immigrants that come and study at MCC, or children of Ukrainian immigrants as well, second generation. We are part of the largest higher education system in the United States, which is called SUNY, or the State University of New York system. We are about 64 institutions in size, and there's about 30 community colleges. We're the third largest community college in New York State, and we have over 100 degree programs and over 40 transfer agreements to four-year institutions. We also have about 11,000 students total at our institution. We have about 100 international, like less than 100 international students on an F1 visa currently, but we have a large immigrant and refugee population. And we have about 25 countries of F1 students represented, including Ukraine. And those are some of our top countries, sending countries. And I also wanted to show a cost comparison. I like to show a cost comparison between a private school like Rochester Institute of Technology and a four-year public school that's a large university in SUNY. So you can see there that we're far, far less than the private institution and still considerably less than the four-year public school. So it's really a great value, and we have transfer agreements to both of these institutions. So we just like to thank you for taking the time to listen to us today, and we hope that we did a great job in explaining about the community college system and representing our college as well. And I'm sure we're going to open it up now for questions, and I'm going to plug in my computer to make sure that it doesn't die on us.
Okay, thank you, Carla. Thank you, Stacy, for the for very interesting presentation. And let's go with the questions, because we do have questions, and they are mostly about the transferring process, because students are very interested. And one of the main questions is about the scholarship, of course. But the question is from the student: can I apply for a scholarship provided by the university during the transferring there? I believe is the student who is transferring eligible for the scholarship in four-year institutions? Because we know that the freshmen are eligible for some scholarship. What about the transferring students?
Yeah, I can take that. Yeah, we see that more and more we have universities that are coming, or that I see coming to our community college and seeking to recruit, particularly our international student population, because they see that these are high achieving students. Their English is already at a high level after being at the community college for several years, and they are coming to us and offering transfer scholarships. So, of course, most universities do have a transfer admissions process, but those that are very eager to receive transfer students are creating special scholarships targeted to that population. And in some cases, they're offering transfer scholarships for international students at community colleges. So we're seeing that as a trend that's increasing over the last several years.
Wow, great.
I would agree.
It's great news.
I would say the majority of my international students who apply to private universities for transfer in particular receive pretty large scholarships to those private schools. The public schools, so in that State University of New York system, they're already less, so they have a little bit less to give, but they often offer as much as they can. So,
Thank you for the for this information. So, can you, like, in few words, tell us about the transferring process? How it's just happening? Does the grades matter? Like, is there any kind of a requirement for the grades or any documents, or how soon the student need to come up with the? I know you will discuss that some students already enter to your to the community colleges with the university in mind, but some students they haven't decided yet. So how early they need to come up with the list of universities, or with the university they want to transfer, so to start this process?
I can start, Stacy.
Sure.
I can talk about what we see. And then I know that you have some guaranteed transfer programs, so I'll let you touch on that. But so Monroe Community College, we do not have any transfer programs that are like guaranteed admission, meaning when you apply to MCC, you already have guaranteed admission to a partner transfer institution. We do not have that currently. So when students apply for transfer, they're submitting an application like a brand new transfer student. There isn't this expectation that they're going to be accepted just because they came to MCC first. But each individual transfer school is going to have their own requirements for admission. So a very selective school, you know, I have students that apply to institutions in the Ivy League or MIT or, you know, very competitive schools, like I mentioned, NYU or these things. So those schools are still going to have very high expectations for a community college GPA. But I think most students, if they have at least a 3.0, which is a B average, or 3.5, they should be able to transfer smoothly to a lot of great name schools. If they don't care as much about where they're going for the name, but maybe they want to stay close by to that community college to continue to live with a family member who is in that area, or they just like that city, they would want to look at the particular admission requirements for each school. So some schools, they might only require a 2.0 or a 2.5 GPA from a community college for admission. So it's really going to depend on the individual school and what they're looking for in a transfer applicant. But I would say that coming to a community college first, like I mentioned, I do think it makes the admission process and the application process much easier, because they can see already if you've performed well at the community college level that you're ready for college study. Whereas when they're admitting a freshman student, it's really kind of a guess, right? They have to look at high school GPA, and they have to look at SAT scores and ACT scores and TOEFL and things like that, put it together and, you know, hope that they're going to do well at the university level. But what's great about community college is you can start there and you can prove to these four-year schools, look, I've got what it takes. I can perform well. So that's how it works for us. I know Stacy has more to add.
I would just say that especially international students, I feel like they should start planning as soon as they arrive. So we talk to our international students the first semester, and we say you need to start thinking and planning now, because the sooner you know, of course, the more time and money you can save. So because as Carly said, every university has slightly different requirements of the GPA, of, you know, which exact classes they will accept from the community college. Just like any transfer process, the university can accept whatever classes they choose, right? So the more general education classes are much easier to transfer. So, you know, we have academic pathways mapped out, especially at our 5 or 6 top university transfer schools. So say you know that you want to study business, so you can look at these 5 schools and you can say, okay, I want to do business at Virginia Tech. They're going to say, here are the exact classes at Nova that you need to take that will transfer on to Virginia Tech. If you maintain a 3.0 GPA by the end of, you know, your second year, you are guaranteed a junior standing position at the university. And that's the value of kind of using one of the community college's guaranteed agreements, right? Because we have more things already preset of what's approved classes at Nova that will be accepted at the university. So that can kind of help the student map out, you know, from the first semester they're at the community college. If they decide to go to another school that maybe we don't have a formal agreement with, then, you know, we don't have as much information to help them plan, you know, early on. They kind of have to guess, you know, what exact courses may be accepted at that university. You know, the more specific courses you get into, it's hit or miss if the university will accept those courses, right? So we're looking at like the general education courses that every university student has to take those first, usually year and a half as part of the bachelor's degree, and those are the courses that are mostly going to be accepted at any institution.
And I would say most, probably all community colleges are going to have transfer agreements with at least some schools that are nearby or that are most popular for students to transfer to. They might not have those exact transfer agreements for every academic program, but they'll probably have them for a lot of their more popular programs and for transfer to their most popular sending schools. And like I said, some schools might have a dual admission where you can apply to the community college and you have guaranteed admission to a four-year school, and others you can just follow kind of that transfer advising model like Stacy mentioned, where you're making sure you're taking the correct courses that will transfer smoothly to a particular school of your choice or a few schools of your choice. And also, I always recommend to students to always ask if they can have certain things waived when they apply to transfer schools. So like if that school has a TOEFL as a admission requirement, I always tell them to ask as a transfer student, hi, I completed our English college composition course at community college and I got an A-. Can I use that as proof of my English proficiency and not have to submit a TOEFL? And a lot of schools are willing to accept certain things in lieu of a TOEFL or in lieu of an SAT or ACT score. So never be afraid to ask.
Wonderful. Thank you for the advice and thank you for the information. Speaking about the agreements, if you can tell what type of agreements do you have, and again, if it's about the transferring, does the student have only the choice to transfer to the university that you have agreement with, or they can choose any university? If you can just also repeat this information for our students as well.
Sure, I'll go first. In terms of agreements, I would say when the student starts researching, if you start looking at community colleges, you might want to, in the search box, hit transfer right on. So on the NOVA website, if you just hit transfer, it's going to come up with a whole page of all of our transfer agreements and information. And so probably most community colleges will have that. And maybe the student wants to start off by looking there, right, to see if they find a school that they have an interest in, kind of working backwards. And so you would want to start there because, of course, the transfer agreement is where you get the most value, right? Because that's where the community college, has personal relationships with the faculty and the administration of that university and the admissions office. And there's a lot of preset agreements already in place that the student can take advantage of. But if for whatever reason, say they come to the community college because maybe my aunt lives, in Washington, D.C., and I'm just going to come to NOVA because it's the most convenient for me right now. And once they arrive, they start taking classes and they travel to New York City. And then they say, oh, I definitely, I love this area better. I want to go to NYU or I want to go to Columbia or whatever it is. And we don't have any formal transfer agreements there, but they can still go through the transfer admissions process that every university has, right? So they would take their community college transcript and apply as a regular transfer admissions student, right? And go through the process more on their own. So it would be more of an independent process. Of course, the advisors at the community college will still help and support, but we may not know anyone at the NYU admissions office, so we don't have as much information. So that's the difference, I would say, between the two options of transfer.
The only thing I would add is that a lot of times when you apply as a transfer student, you can get a transfer credit, like an estimate of what your transfer credit would look like from the four-year school. So say you apply to 3 different four-year universities that you're interested in transferring to, and they give you kind of an estimate of what your transfer credit from the community college would look like, what it would come in as, and what you'd have left to complete at the four-year school once you go there. You can use that to make your decision, right? Because sometimes you might need to do a full extra semester of study to get your 4-year degree at one school versus another where you might transfer to more smoothly. So, always see if you can work with some of those transfer schools to get an idea of what your transfer credit might look like, a transfer credit estimate. I don't know if, Stacy, there's a better term for that, but that's a good strategy also, especially when time is money.
Yeah, thank you, Carly. Well, I mean, I think we have all the questions. Maybe the last one I have, because I already had it from my students. We've discussed that if the students that don't know about the major and probably they choose the liberal arts, they have some time and they can choose the major when they transfer to the university, 4-year university. What if the student already has chosen the major when admitted to community college, and then during the 2 years just decided it's not my thing, I want to change the major? Is it possible to change the major and when transfer to the 4-year university?
Carly, you want to take it?
I was just going to say it happens all the time. And that's what's great about the American model of higher education, right? Is that students can change their minds. Once you enter into university, it doesn't mean that you're locked into what you've chosen at the beginning. I think we have a lot of students who, they might start out as a biology major, and it could be really, really difficult and not what they're expecting. And on the way, they start taking some psychology classes and they decide, wow, this is really interesting and this is really what I want to pursue. That happens a lot. And I think what's great about the community college is it gives you more, I think it does give you more of that time for that flexibility and exploration with a little bit less pressure. And I love that about us, and I would definitely encourage students to do more of that exploration, because it's really important to make sure that you're studying something that you're passionate about and that you're going to want to pursue in the future going forward. So yeah, that happens all the time. The downside is if you decide to make that switch later on, you might need a little bit more time to finish your degree. Obviously, if you're switching in your 2nd or 3rd year rather than your 1st year, you've already got more of your degree requirements completed, and you might kind of have to take a little bit to step back. But like I said, it's so common in American higher ed, and so it's certainly not something to be afraid of or to prevent you from making the switch.
Yeah, no additional comments. That's exactly, I agree.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. I see no more questions, and thank you, Carly. Thank you, Stacy, for your time, for the information. Very interesting presentation and the information about your colleges. Well, I hope it was very useful to our audience, and have a great day. Stay healthy. And I hope we'll see you more in the future. And if our audience have any questions, well, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to EducationUSA, and we will be able to probably get you connected to either Stacy or Carly if you have more additional questions, or we can probably answer your questions about the community colleges and the 2+2 system. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
We good?
Yeah, I think.